We are live and we are back for the next episode of How Do You Solve a Problem with Maria and Gareth. It's LinkedIn Live. This is Sidetrain and Maria's here. Maria, how are you doing today? Happy Halloween.
You look like the Hogwarts sorting hat.
That's exactly what this is exactly. Yeah, it's my wizard's hat. My witchy wizard's hat. Maria, how are you doing today? You ready for this special Halloween episode of How Do You
Ready.
Solve a Problem?
All pumpkiny.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Well, let's say a little bit about what we're going to be doing today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're joining us live on LinkedIn, of course, as always, you can put any questions, any comments directly into the comments on LinkedIn, and we'll see them here on the live feed. We can answer them. We can come back with any comments or any questions. But what we're going to be doing today, Maria, what are we going to be doing today on Halloween special episode of How Do You Solve a Problem with Maria and Gareth?
So we're going to talk about spooky tales. How the different ways, all the different ways, stop doing that. All the different ways in which you can get a very bad response whenever you're trying to submit a paper. And it could be in all stages of the academic publishing cycle. You have to beware that you start out with the right idea. Now, people will tell you that sometimes that every idea is a good idea. That's not true, because all good ideas have probably been had before. So it would be good to check whether somebody else has done the work that you plan to do before you go and do it again.
We're going to work our way around the academic publishing cycle, as Maria was just saying in our spooky Halloween themed episode of How Do You Solve a Problem? We're going to start off with ideas, then we're going to move on to funding, research data collection, journal selection, which Maria and I have a bit of a disagreement about whether that should come before or after the paper writing stage, but we'll come back to that in a moment. Then submission and peer review, and finally publication, giving you some stories and tricks and treats at each stage, like what to do, what we did that was a mistake, and how you can not make those same mistakes. Right, so let's get going. Maria, how are you feeling today, by the way? You doing well?
Yes, I'm doing well, much better than you. You're all bunged up.
Yeah, well, that's why you're going to do most of the talking in our special one-off Halloween themed event today. But let's begin with ideation, and we call this coming up with a great idea for a piece of research, identifying a knowledge gap. And this is one of the biggest issues that especially starting early career researchers face when they're doing their PhD or doing their masters. They've got a theme, they know in which area they're going to be working, and you can have a think about your own subject area, your own broad area of research. But within that area, within that theme, how are you going to come up with a topic, with a research question, with a research idea that's going to bear fruit, that's going to be worthwhile, and that's going to be interesting? Maria, you've been down this road, I know, coming up with ideas for research projects.
Mm-hmm. So it's always a good idea to get to know what the field that you're going to be researching in a little bit before you dive deep into doing loads of experiments. Um, Sometimes, and most of the time, that is more and more well looked upon. It's good to reproduce findings that other people have done. So it's good to reproduce experiments to make sure that you get them working in your own hands, that you have the same results, that you were able to come to the same conclusion or similar conclusion as to the people before you. But you have to move forward. You have to move past that. For a PhD, most of the time you need to do original research, which means that you need to find something, a very usually tiny gap in knowledge that you will look at specifically. So I can tell you what mine was, but it's very, 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 very tiny. What was yours, Gareth?
My PhD was also on a very, 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 very tiny niche area of the evolution of birds, which only like 5 or 6 people in the world would be really interested in learning about. But The trick here is not wasting time, not wasting resources, finding a way that you can come up with a knowledge gap, working with your supervisor, working with other people in your department. And we've got here on the screen, on the slide, like a number of different ways that you can do that. And as with all of these topics, if you'd like more information, you can get in touch, because we will be able to show up virtually, minus the hat, to present information about all of these areas of research around the research cycle to you and your colleagues, because that's what we do. We help with the research cycle. So having come up with a great idea for a research project, the next trick is to get money, often, to support your data collection, to support your analyses. And I've had a few research grants. Maria, I know you've had a few research grants. What we did was we put together a list of reasons why funding agencies turn down research grant applications. Maria?
So whenever you have the original idea, you need to be sure that it's original. You need to come up with a plan to answer your research questions and know what's been done in your area. So those are the main broader reasons why sometimes you wouldn't get funding or you wouldn't get the grant that you're applying for. Other ones, which are less slightly less savory, are the questionable reasoning in the experimental approach. You need to know why you're doing the things that you're doing, which is one of the things that most of the people will not then report in their manuscript, is the rationale for doing the experiments. Why are you doing this experiment using this technique and not another technique? Which is the absence of acceptable scientific rationale. You need to explain why it is that you've decided that that is the best approach. Not everyone may agree with you, but you are the one doing that, so you have a reason for that. You also need to put in writing your ideas for the experiments that you want to do. You can name them experiment 1, 2, 3, 4, and say that we'll use this broad approach, but you have to come up with a plan to answer the questions in some way. And the last one, the last one in this issue of broader ones, is the uncritical approach, is that you need to be able to figure out if what you're doing is worth it, if what you're doing is in line with what other people are doing in your field, or completely outside of the realm of what people are thinking about, which could also be the case, but then you need to argue, you need to justify yourself.
What we're doing, as you probably realized in this spooky event today, is we're giving you a bit of a taster of some of the content that we have in our SciTrain webinars. And this is actually quite a lot of information from our grant writing Funding for Success event, because we did go and we did put together a whole list of reasons from funding agencies as to why they didn't fund research grants. And these are worth having a look at. As Maria was saying, the topic not important enough, not likely to produce useful information, based on shaky hypotheses or data. We don't have time to go into these in great detail here in this quick event today, but nevertheless, you will get like some hints and tips and tricks on successful management of that research cycle in our event today. Ideas, getting funded, what comes next? Maria?
So you say that it's better to select a journal before writing. I say that a lot of the time you need to select a range of journals that you are likely to submit to before you start to write. If you get too bogged down and too specific on one particular one that it's the one that you're going for, then you get too invested in it. You get too emotionally invested in it, and you really want to get accepted by that. So if you get a rejection, or if you get major revisions that you can't do, then it's really hard to flip it and resubmit it to another journal.
But the trick here, though, is not to just write the paper without any journal in mind. And we both do agree on that. We fight a lot, we disagree a lot, but on this particular point, we do agree it's not the best strategy, not the best trick to write the paper and then try to find a journal. As Maria said, do have some target journals in mind, or as I would argue, have a target journal in mind so that you can answer many of the problems and questions that researchers have over the structure of the writing. What goes where? People ask us all the time, what should I put into the methods? How much information in the results? What should the figure captions look like? If you have at least a target journal or journals in mind, then you can answer for yourself lots of those questions. And that's a real trick for you there that we have for getting ahead in the article writing and publishing process. Pick journals before you get started. And here's another great trick that we have up our sleeves this Halloween to be successful getting your work published. Maria?
So it's always useful to write pre-submission inquiries, which is where you write an email to the editor-in-chief or to whoever you get contact from the journal, even if it's a section editor, and reach out with the abstract and the title of what you're planning to submit and ask if that's something that they would be willing to consider, if it's within the scope of the journal, if it's of interest to their readership. Because it may be that what you have and the results that you're showing are interesting, but you may need to slightly alter the way that you're presenting them or the focus that you're giving to your research, depending on the readership of the journal. That's why I said that maybe if you get to a couple of journals, for instance, I would be able to, when I was doing research, I would be able to publish into vascular physiology journals, but also into microcirculation journals, into anatomy and physiology journals, into it's slightly different, and you can enhance or highlight the results that are most applicable to the readership.
Me too, same here. Biology journals, geology journals, as well as specific paleontology subject area specific journals. So the trick here is that you're not limited by the number of pre-submission inquiries you can make. You are limited by the number of journal submissions, actual journal submissions you can make. That can only be one at a time. You can't send the same paper to lots of different journals and see which one accepts it first and then withdraw all the other submissions. That's unethical. And if you'd like more information about ethics in research and publication, SciTrain is the place for you. Pre-submission inquiries, you can write to lots of editors and ask them, as Maria just mentioned, whether they'd be interested in having your next paper submitted to their journal. It's a great, great trick for publication success. And here's what researchers tend to think when they look for journals, right, Maria?
Yes. So depending on where you are in your career as well, you may want to publish as fast as possible. Imagine that you need a paper to graduate. You just need it to graduate. You want to publish as fast as possible, and you want to do it in as effortlessly as time as possible, in a place that is still peer reviewed, high quality, and all of those things. But it may be that within your own niche area, you want to get known only by the people that are likely to offer you your next job, and those are the ones that aren't going to read niche journals. As you progress, you may want to have higher reach and wider readership. So you may want to progress into cross-disciplinary journals, journals that are broader in scope. And further down the line, probably you are already vying for higher impact factor journals, which are the best for your specific niche, your career, what you plan to do with your own research in the future.
It depends a bit where you're based. In the US, for example, it's less important for researchers to submit their papers to higher impact factor journals. In Europe, that's a big consideration. But as Maria was saying, especially in the medical sciences, health sciences, we see lots of journals that are quite niche, that have a high readership and a decent reach within a particular research field, but might not have such a high impact factor or such a big international presence. So it really depends what's most important for you. The trick here is to do what's best for you and think about journal selection so that you can maximize your route to publication most effectively. Really important, probably the most important decision that researchers make. and the one that they really put the least time and effort and energy into, I would say, unfortunately. Journal selection. Really, really important. Maria, let's talk about Arnold, because now, like it or not, we're going to move on to writing your paper, and he's pretty scary, Arnold Schwarzenegger, to fit in with our Halloween theme.
And orange. So, about
He looks like a
writing in,
pumpkin.
he looks like a pumpkin, yes. A lot of people, so the majority of people nowadays that write scientific papers in English are not native English speakers. So they are at a disadvantage to start out with. So you need to first think about what you want to say and then write up a plan of how you're going to say it. Build up a story in your head. Every paper is a story. You need to tell people why you started doing the research, what you found that was worthy of your time investment, and then describe how you went about doing it, what you obtained, what you learned from it, what you can teach to other people because of what you learned from it. So it's always better to start grabbing papers and figure out where you're going to cite them in your story. Make up your figures and start to describe them in an orderly fashion. And then step back and think about whether that tells a story that you want to tell or whether that tells a completely different story. So I think it's very much, and I tend to be very old school and draw up like a sketch on a piece of paper of those are the figures that I want, and that's what I want to say, and build up from that really, because then it's a matter of putting things together, like
Old school. I like it.
jigsaw.
It's really, yeah,
Jigsaw.
put it, but you do need a structure. And that's like what we always say in our training events. Before you get going writing a paper, you need your message, your
Hmm.
audience, which of course is your target journal, as we talked about before. And the third thing is structure, which of course comes from your target journal. But you do need a plan. You do want to be like Arnold. It's a bit of a joke slide, but it's very true in a second or third language. You need a plan, you need a structure. Be a bricklayer, put that structure together, as Maria was saying, bit by bit, piece by piece, depending on the target journal, and put that article together. We're here to help, of course. That's what we do as well. We help researchers all over the world writing their papers all of the time. But the trick here is having a structure, being like Arnold, getting ready for article writing in advance. It's our roadmap for publication success. That's what our SciTrain training is really all about, right, Maria? Many, many, many researchers have benefited from our training programs over the years.
uh, so what we keep telling you is that be prepared, always be prepared for the unexpected. And think carefully before you even start to write, because it's quite a big effort, especially if it's not your first language. So what you probably want to do is dump your ideas on paper, write as much as you possibly can for each individual section of your paper, and then edit yourself, because you can take sections of your story and highlight what you've done and highlight what you think is important. um, Start to, like your painting, start to capture attention to a shade of something that it is specifically relevant, particularly relevant to you. And for that, there is a set of simple rules that can make all the difference. And the first of them is the structure and the plan. And the second of them is write everything that you can possibly think of. Nothing is stupid, and then edit.
We've got it all here laid out on the roadmap. Preparations to write, selling yourself, putting your structure in place, and then effective writing. And if you're finding this interesting and you'd like to learn more about what we have on offer at SciTrain, we'd love to hear from you at the end of this event. But as we move on round that infamous publication cycle, we come to my favorite slide, all about academic branding. Your paper's been accepted, or your paper's about to get accepted. What happens next, Maria? How can we start to then build our profile as a researcher, build that out, and start talking about the research to generate maximum impact?
This says a lot about you. that your favorite slide is a cow's behind. But but your profile as a researcher and where you position yourself in the greater story of the people that came before you is what you want to achieve. You want people to say that, Einstein solved this, and then somebody else solved that, and then in the midst of it all, at the very end, for a tiny bit, Gareth solved, I don't know, the witching relativity. I have no idea, but you do want to position yourself within a timeline and a time frame of researchers that you admire, probably, because those are the ones that the papers you've read, the papers you admire, the papers that you want to emulate. So you want to be able to tell people whether you are very specialized in a specific methodology, whether you are able to talk to researchers from other fields, whether you are all about the translation of your research into clinic or industry. That is something that is individual and that you can portray in your writing.
So your paper's been accepted and it's passed successfully through peer review, which of course is a real nightmare. And we talk a lot about the nightmare of peer review in our other events and other trainings. So we're not dwelling on that particularly in this event today, but peer review is very important as well, right, Maria? Like, do you have some tricks up your sleeve to help our friends listening to this event to manage successfully peer review as a researcher? Give us one of your best tricks for surviving peer review.
Um, Always talk to the editor as if they're a person, and ask questions. If you don't know the answer, ask questions. If you are unsure of what the reviewers are asking you, ask questions. The editor is the ultimate decider, so they may well tell you, we are rejecting the paper at this stage, but if you say, well, but I am at the moment running some experiments, and if I we plan that this will have the result X and Y, do you think that we may submit this to you in resubmit this in a revised version, a new version of this story in 3 months? They may well tell you that you're more than welcome, and you already have an in for when you're planning to resubmit your paper again.
That's called a soft rejection. If you're listening to this and you've never heard about that before, lots of journals do that. They reject initial submissions after peer review, but you can always talk to the editor, as Maria was saying, and ask for a second chance. When I've collected more data, can I resubmit? Also, what happens, Maria, if you get comments from a reviewer that you disagree with, that you think are ghastly, ghostly, really, really negative? Can you appeal? Can you talk to the editor if you feel you've been really unfairly treated in peer review?
Yes, you can. And most of the time, the editors will be willing to go back and reassess the reviewer's feedback, because there are different aspects that editors deal with this, right? So some editors will say that they have the possibility and the obligation to edit some of the reviewers' comments. Some editors believe that reviewers' comments are completely fine to be left unchecked and go straight to the authors, but then they will give you their own opinion. So at some stages, the editor will have to read what the reviewers have told you and rank their own priorities, not completely trust that the reviewers are discerning in what's major and minor issues for their specific journal, but they will tell you tell you what are the priorities and what you need to focus on and what you can let go of.
I have a few tricks as well, like read carefully the emails that come back to you from journals, because they'll give away like the stage at which you're at with the peer review process. And this is a real trick. If you read in that email that you're being asked to make minor changes to your paper, then chances are your paper will not be going back to the same peer reviewers again. So look for that wording, minor changes. rather than moderate or comprehensive or major changes. If you see those kinds of wordings in an email from a journal, then be careful, because probably, almost certainly, the original reviewers, two or three of them, however many, will at least be given the opportunity by the editor to look at your paper again. So the way that you word your responses to minor changes, only the editor is going to be reading your responses, versus moderate or comprehensive changes, the editor and the peer reviewers will probably be looking at the changes and the comments that you make, can be different. So keep that in mind as well. If you're nasty about comments that you've received, or dismissive of comments that you've received, and the paper goes back to the same peer reviewers, what are they going to do? They're going to reject the paper. So that is a real trick that I have from my own research career, my own research experience. Also, often when journals send you back minor revisions, they also send you back the copyright transfer information at the same time, which is a huge clue that your paper's about to get accepted. So congratulations, you don't take it to the bank just yet, but you are in a very good position. Maria, back to the topic of branding in our last few moments. How do you promote yourself these days? How do you talk about your research these days to build your profile as a researcher?
So you can talk about it with your peers, you can talk about it online, you can have social accounts that are designed specifically to promote what you do and your activity. You still publish papers. You have a lot of ways that you can get nice images out, and infographics and videos and podcasts and all of the above, and also still um, go to conferences and meet up with people in your field, because that's always a good idea to know what other people are doing and to figure out how they have measured the impacts of their research. Can't hear you, Gareth.
Oopsie, you just have to talk about it, right? A ghost got into my microphone. Sorry about that, everybody. You just have to talk about your research, because don't do what I used to do when I would publish a paper. Absolutely nothing. Just move on to the next project. I didn't really care too much about whether it ever got any media coverage, or whether the research ever got picked up, like, with the TV or the radio, whatever. You can tell how old I am talking about the radio. But, like, it's important. Like, research has shown that even by doing a little bit of self-promotion, a little bit, blogging, social media, making a podcast, participating in a podcast or a webinar, talking about your research, dramatically increases your citation rate, right, Maria? That really, really, really helps a lot to get the work out there. More people are going to see it, more people are going to read it, and more people are going to cite it.
Yes, and don't forget that academies is a language in itself. It's really hard for people that are not used to it to read an academic paper and get some useful information out of it, some actionable things that they could do for themselves in their own life. So it's always good for you to translate that into them. Write a blog about why you did what you did, why it was important for you, why you were interested in that, and don't go on at length about protein conformations and things like that. Just why is it important? Why are you doing what you're doing? What do you plan to achieve with it? What's the end goal of it all? And usually in biomedical science papers, it's to cure something, it's to help to cure something, it's to learn how it's done so that you can cure something. So that is always what people take away from it, that it may not be immediate, but somebody is doing something to help them.
Promote, promote, promote. I mean, it's against many of our natures to talk about our own research, but it's definitely, definitely, definitely well worth doing. Collaborate is another great way to get more people learning about your research. And the old PLS, the plain language summary that we've all been talking about so much recently in the industry. But, understanding impact with your research is a real trick. We have workshops and webinars on this, how to build your impact, your brand as a researcher: inputs, outputs, outcomes, intended impact, and what difference your research makes to society. As Maria was saying, this comes from your message. You've got your message, you know your audience, you've got the structure of your writing, you're ready to go with your whole publication plan. And if you're sitting here on Halloween thinking, I'd like to publish a paper before the end of the year, how can I do that? Get in touch with us, right, Maria? We can give you that publication plan to get your work out this year.
Well, it's one of those times, and after Halloween, it's Christmas already, and there's already Christmas decorations. And I can't believe I'm saying this because I'm wearing a t-shirt. It's not like climate change is ever going to affect us in any way, but just reach out to us. Will be here to wait for you and to be able to give you some pointers if you need it. Just comment, reach out in LinkedIn, email, send us
Great.
a carrier pigeon.
We're here all the time. We'll be back in 2 weeks. In the next installment, fantastic installment of How Do You Solve a Problem with Maria and Gareth. Thank you so much for listening to this Halloween special issue. Maria, thank you once again, as always, for your kind participation, and we'll see you all again in the next episode.